Go. All right. Hi, everybody. We're back again with Excess Exceed, the show where Gearface continually tricks experts into teaching him Exceed characters.
He
I'm very,
thinks he tricked me. I
yeah,
tricked him.
secretly Reggie tricked me. Um, I'm very happy to have Reggie back on the show, teach me all about uh, universally beloved, uncontroversial Happy Chaos. Um,
Yep.
both in Exceed and in Guilty Gear Strive, the source material. No one has any complaints about fighting this character. So I'm really excited to have a totally uncontroversial lesson today, Reggie.
Yeah, totally fair, good. No one's gonna be upset.
Mhm.
Um, Importantly, these are our opinions. They are for trying to play well and win in tournaments, but that's not the only way to play Exceed. Uh, there are other ways to play, and if you think anything we say is wrong, fight me. You can find me at Gearface's house. I'm in his basement.
Yep.
Uh, did I miss anything else from the disclaimer?
You stole all my disclaimer, and I'm so offended. No, that's pretty much it.
You get
Yeah, play for fun. We're going to be talking about playing to win. Uh, Maybe play Happy Chaos only against your worst enemies. Um, yeah, I think that's probably it though. Reggie, thank you for man. If I can get my other guests to also host the interview, this is going to be really easy. I'll just let them talk to
yeah,
themselves.
I will. Don't challenge me. I can talk about nonsense for up to 90 minutes.
Perfect. All right.
Um
Reggie, you want to get started?
so yeah, before I talk about anything remotely useful, I told Gearface this before we started. I went and bought a tiny pair of glasses that are like very small love heart shapes. Specifically for this because Happy Chaos has silly glasses.
So you're
It's
you're
very important they need to know that
you're
I am
in
wearing those currently.
you're in the spirit of the character. I didn't do anything special for this lesson, so I'm really holding up my end here.
Yeah. So this is how to play Happy Chaos, or how I learned to stop worrying and love the gun.
Okay.
Uh, Gearface, you don't watch movies, do you?
I watch movies.
Okay.
I'm a big movie snob.
Nah. Anyway, so
Disagree? All right. That's fair.
Happy Chaos is the character you play because you want to not play a fair game.
Okay.
Uh, he's pretty simple. He has less cards than everyone else. As in terms of variety, he
Mhm.
only has five unique cards.
Right.
Each of his cards he has three of, except at the ready, which he has two of.
Okay.
And fundamentally, and three of them are ultras.
Right.
Uh,
So very, very oddly
so
shaped kit.
literally the most uniquely shaped kit in Exceed, in my opinion.
Yep.
Like you could argue nine with her extras, but
Yeah.
I think Happy Chaos gets it.
Right.
He's a snowbally, punishing, advantage chainy type dude.
Mhm.
Uh, and he has some very scary fireballs. So his ability, we'll start there because it's
Sure.
easy. Hit, you may seal an ultra from your hand. If you do, plus one power and gain advantage.
Right.
So anytime you hit, you can seal one of these three cards from your hand to give your attack plus one power and advantage.
And this is a
Uh,
this is a third this is a third of my deck right here, right? This is 9 cards. So
Cards. Yep.
there's a pretty good chance that I've got an ultra in my hand.
Yep. Then you
Okay.
have nine of these with access to. Uh, that also means that it doesn't sound super impressive, right? It's plus one power and gain advantage.
Right.
Then you consider something like sweep.
Yep.
Your sweeps are seven power and gain advantage. You can play focus on defense, and if the opponent gains advantage, you're almost certainly slower, so you're stealing the advantage back and out trading because it's a 5 power
It's
focus.
because it's focused, right? And this does work on defense as well, so you can do it reactively. Okay,
Yep, and it's on hit, so you're not committing anything
right,
until you see the situation. You could go, no, I don't want to seal an ultra to gain what +1 power and advantage because I'm taking the next turn anyway. Or,
right,
oh, yeah. Or you go, okay, yeah, I definitely want to seal here because the +1 power gets me over a stun break point. Or,
right. And
so,
it's a stun break point that you need to beat the opponent's card that you've already seen and know about.
yep,
Okay, so you can kind of option select it.
yeah. You
Okay,
you have all the information. You have information. You can act on it. And then for three gauge, he exceeds, and when he exceeds, he strikes with the printed attack.
okay,
So it's a 1 to 5, 4/4 with 5 guard, and has hit shuffle your sealed area into your deck and draw 3.
okay,
So you're sealing ultras for your frontside ability and a couple other things in the kit, and in return, you can just get those bullets back. You can reload and
yep.
draw 3.
And you have kind of a like an unremarkable but like pretty consistent and pretty good attack on top of it.
Yeah, it's 4 power and 4 speed with 5 guard, and it hits over half the board. If you're
Yep.
standing on center space, this hits every space.
Yeah.
And it's fast enough that things that, unless ignoring ultras, this is fast enough that it beats most things that would stun it, and has enough guard against most things that would outspeed it. Um,
It's
Things to be
probably.
wary of. Oh yeah, go.
Oh no, go ahead.
So, because when you exceed, you strike with it straight away. It is face up. The opponent knows you are playing it.
Mhm.
So, if they do have a counter to it, they will play it. They
Right.
have access. So, if they have, some sort of ultra that's above curve, or something like Plague Knight has a 2 power ignore guard at speed 6 or something.
Right.
It's stuff
Um,
like that. The weird edge case cards. They will play them into this. So
right.
be wary.
And you can't. It is impossible for you to play this on defense, right? Like you cannot play this on your opponent's turn.
Correct.
Okay.
You strike immediately when you exceed. So yeah, there is no way. And th- there's one copy of this card. There is one way in Happy Chaos's kit to make this EX, but otherwise,
Right.
it's basically as printed.
It's what you've got. And then after he hits it, he reverts after the strike is
Correct.
over. Okay. So his exceed mode is one attack at the time of exceed, and then he flips back over and he continues on front side again.
Yeah. So
Okay.
99% of the game, you're going to be on front side.
Right. Okay.
The exceed is a reload in terms of getting stuff back from your sealed area, and also it draws you some cards.
Right. And just to bookkeeping on the side, because I actually don't think it's come up in any of these lessons so far. The sealed area is not your discard. It's another area on the board where you put cards that most of the time when you seal something, they're just uninteractable. You cannot take them back. You cannot
Yeah.
reshuffle them. They're just gone from the game. Happy Chaos and a few other characters have the ability to recur cards from their sealed area. It's just another area of play where dead cards go,
Ye
basically.
Yeah, basically, I think every character that seals after season 2 has ways to interact with their sealed area because
Right.
it's interesting. But
Right.
that does mean it means they don't just go to get discard and then you can reshuffle to get them back. Basically, you have to find the ways that let you get to them.
Right. Okay.
Yep. So that's his ability. Relatively, impactful ability.
Mhm.
It means essentially your normals game is so much better
Right.
because normals with +1 power and gain advantage are very good.
Right. And I'm looking at
Uh,
his specials and ultras, and just as printed, the +1 power isn't um overcoming any ridiculous breakpoints except for steady aim, where
oh.
you can potentially get yourself up to 7 there.
Yeah, you can get yourself up to 7 there, but most of the time that's not going to matter.
Right.
'Cause if you're, you're at a range where you're playing steady aim,
Right.
most of the time it's beaten because of movement, not because of power, not because it didn't hit hard enough.
Right, sure. But so really the +1 power from his character ability is most impactful on the normals, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's not bad on his specials, and a lot of normals +1 power isn't going to get you a breakpoint anyway. It's
True.
really mostly just sweep
It's just sweep.
and assault
But
because there's a
but
full guards.
oh, that's true, right? But over the course of the game, though, just like slightly
Yeah,
improving your trades, like you're not necessarily going to be uh overwhelmingly winning combat every time you use this ability, but over the course of a game, you're going to be trading up on your opponent enough to stay ahead.
yeah.
Okay.
So I'll start with the ultras first, and then move on to the specials because I can.
Yep.
So you have 3 ultras. They're all fireballs. Uh, Cheap shot is a 1 to 4, but its best at ranges greater than 1.
Sure.
They're all 1 gauge, but 2 of these are liars. So gun down and steady aim both have after seal this on them.
Oh, so
So if you
they
play
don't go
this
to
card,
gauge.
you do not generate gauge. So they're almost like a 2 gauge ultra.
Right.
Um,
They're a 2 gauge ultra that you can play with 1 gauge.
yeah.
Okay.
Uh, and these all being 1 gauge means that when you're playing Happy Chaos, getting that first gauge is super important to you because
Right.
these are a third of your deck.
Right.
If
So
without that first gauge, they're nothing. It also means when you exceed, if you're exceeding on a low deck count, right? Say you've got 6 cards in deck and you've got 6 in sealed, you shuffle your sealed area back in. Half that deck that you are drawing 3 from now is ultras.
yeah,
So when you exceed, it might be worth waiting to exceed till you have a fourth
a
gauge,
fourth.
so
Totally.
that
Yeah.
you're not just stuck, wild swinging through a deck of ultras you can't
Right.
pay for.
And so like gun down and steady aim have an after effect where you seal the card. Um and also you're sealing ultras for on a hit effect. So you could conceivably steady aim on hit, seal another ultra, and then steady aim gets sealed as well. So
Yep.
you can burn through ultras and seal them fairly quickly on some cards.
Yep.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
So we'll move from right to left because I'm looking at the one on the right first.
Sounds
So
good.
steady aim is a 3 to 8, 4 to 6, and when you initiate with this, you can set it face up for +2 power and ignore armor, and after seal this. So it's a card that if you are in a position where it is good, it is devastatingly good
Right.
because it's 6 damage that ignores armor that the opponent can't do anything about.
Right.
And if you seal an ultra, it's 7 damage and you're gaining advantage at that long range. So if you have, say, I don't know, 2 gauge when you do this, the first one to pay for the first one, seal another ultra,
Yeah.
then you can do it again.
Yeah.
And in Exceed, a game that is so heavily dedicated to trading, almost every strike you're trading, the little incremental things are what win you the game a lot of the time. Doing 6 damage without trading is a hell of a thing. That's incredible. The
Yeah.
downside is it's a 3 to 8 2 speed. So a lot of the time you're playing this at ranges 5 or greater. Because if you play it at 3, you lose to assault, dive, and
Assault.
spike.
Sure. Yeah.
4, you lose to assault and dive. At least at 5 and greater, you only lose to dive. Or 5 only, sorry. You only lose to dive. And any further than that, you're just winning.
Yeah, you're doing fine. So when first of all, um so it sounds like this is just like a ranged punish, right? Like I've run my opponent out of options that would allow them to meaningfully contest this card. So I just kill them with it, and
Yeah.
potentially a couple times in a row. Um, because of that use case, sounds like is like potentially a win condition for me. Um,
Yeah.
I guess first of all, how much of my game plan should be devoted to getting rid of answers to steady aim?
So I find a lot of the things that are answers to steady aim will naturally get taken out over the course of the game by stuff like gun down, which is works at similar or slightly closer ranges than steady aim,
Yep.
and fire. Just reliable threats the opponent feels the need to respond to,
Okay.
and cheap shot as well. If the opponent thinks they can get in, you know, then you hit them with a cheap shot.
Right.
Um,
Okay. So you're not necessarily like this is a late game card because things will naturally go down over the course of the game, not because you are deliberately fishing to parry away
yeah,
your opponent's dives or something like that.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. No, yeah. I like to think of Happy Chaos play as really opportunistic.
Sure.
Um, you have good tools for a variety of situations. Despite his kit being mostly range stuff, he has a pretty good close range game due to his ability.
Right.
Normals with +1 power and gain advantage are good.
Yeah.
Um, so he can you can flex into doing what you think will work in the moment. The opponent is out of dives. Okay, let's punish.
Right.
The opponent is uh, got a lot of closing range tools. Steady aim's probably not going to be great. Escape.
Right.
So let's look at my other options.
Right. And then the other that makes sense. And then the other question I have about this card, do you ever strike with it face down?
No,
Yeah.
no.
It's the benefit of it is the +2 power and ignore armor. So like you really only want to do this when you're sure it's going to hit because they know it's coming.
Yeah, like the times you're playing steady aim, you're probably playing it because it's the option that it hits.
Yeah.
Like that's basically the reason you play steady aim. It's just the option that hits.
And I
Um,
assume it's pretty unlikely that you're ever going to be playing this on defense because if they're initiating into if they're initiating it at a far range, it means that they at least have an option.
yeah,
Um,
and typically they, like low tagger shot, for example, is also 2 speed. So even if they play that face down, it's gonna trade with this. You would
right.
rather wait and then just on your turn play your steady aim face up
Right. Okay.
because it won't be stunned. So yeah, and then so Happy Chaos has 4 uses for each of his ultras. You have the attack, the
Right.
boost,
Right.
the force, and then seal.
And then sealing it. Right.
Yep. So that's the attack portion. It's an opportunistic tool. The boost on it is drift. Advance 3. If you advance past the opponent, take another action, seal this. So if at any point, you're stuck at range 1 against the opponent, no, you're not. Or you're at long range and you want to get in closer. This is another advance 3 card. They're
Right.
not the most common. Every character in season 5 has the boost on assault, a 7, not 5. Uh, they had the boost on assault, and that's about it for the movement
Right.
in their boost kit. So this is a big deal. It gets you in, it gets you past. Um, you could get to take another action.
Yeah. You get action
So
compression.
even if we're in say this position, where it'd be at range 2,
Right.
it would only get me to range 2, but I'm no longer cornered then.
Sure.
So even then, it's still quite useful. It also seals it, which, oh, that might sound bad, but given the ways he has to interact with his sealed area, it's not necessarily the worst thing. You
Right.
know, it's another thing you can shuffle back with your exceed mode, or two other surprise tools later.
Okay.
Yeah. So
And
then we have Gundam. Yep.
so sorry to interrupt. It sounds like there's going to be a lot of times throughout the game where steady aim is not useful as an attack because they
Yes.
still do have options. So I either am boosting with this or I'm doing, the standard, force expenditures that any other character would do, or I'm sealing this for something else. And
Yes.
then
And
when it's ready, steady aim is my killer.
yeah.
Okay.
When I'm evaluating my hand, and if I have multiple ultras, in 90% of board states, this is the steady aim is the one I'm sealing.
Okay.
Um, it's it's a very specific tool, unlike the other two, which are more general tools. And uh, I just find that a lot of the time you only need one steady aim to land.
Right.
Uh, yeah. So then on to gun down. So it's a 2 to 5, 3-5. Well, that doesn't sound that impressive. Ignore guard. Hit the opponent must discard a card after seal this.
Right. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's not very kind. Yeah, so it's an above or on curve option. Technically, it could be below curve, but don't play it at range two. You have so many other things you can do at range two. Um, yeah, so it's above or on curve that ignores guard that makes the opponent discard a card. Notably, not random. It is of their choice.
Yeah.
Uh, that so yeah, this is a card that is very threatening. People will be scared of you playing this card. They will also probably try to play around it. Um, it's not the easiest thing to play around, but they'll try and do it anyway.
Right.
Uh,
So you can
it
just hold this over their head, play it on defense because it's tends to be above curve. Uh,
yeah,
it ignore guard and 3 power stunts focus, but you're probably not playing it at range two. But like you're probably just going to win combat for free, quote unquote,
yeah,
if you play this.
yeah. It
Okay.
wins, but it never really wins big.
Yeah.
Um, it's a consistent tool, and that's usable in a few situations. So whereas steady aim is not consistent but wins massively when it wins,
Right.
gun down is basically the opposite. And then it has curse on it. Now retreat 1 or 2. You may spend 1 force. If you do strike, hit, add this card to your gauge. So that's the only way you're getting curse into your gauge, gun down into your gauge.
Right.
First of all, because
Right.
it seals itself. Second of all, it means at range 4, as long as you have a gauge and an extra force, steady aim is live.
Okay. This can set up into steady aim in positions where it doesn't really look like uh
Yeah,
you're threatening it. Okay.
yeah. If you're at range 3 or 4, it that gets you to ranges 5 or 6, which if you're at range 5 or 6, you're probably hitting steady aim,
Right.
and and you're generating a gauge off it, which you
Right.
normally would not do when you play steady aim.
Right. And so that's a force bank of 2 force that you normally don't have, that you can
Yeah.
spend again for change cards or movement or something. Okay.
Yep.
When
Uh.
I when I
Yep.
um when I hit or sorry, when I play this boost, you may spend 1 force if you do strike. If I don't spend that 1 force, the hit effect is still on the card, right? It's not
Correct.
that's not
Yeah.
part of the 1 force expenditure. So I could conceivably retreat, not spend a force, and then if my opponent strikes into me, I still have the hit at this gauge.
You could. Yep.
Okay.
Um. I'm not sure. While that's technically an option, I'm not sure it's really worth it. I think if you're looking to save force, I think you're better to just not boost curse and then come to it later. Um,
That makes
but
sense.
yeah, you can do that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was parsing the card
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
no, you're absolutely correct. Um, then we are on to ultra number 3, cheap shot, 1 to 4, 0, 6, hit, push or pull 1. After, if the opponent is stunned, they must discard 2 cards. So it's like a whirl, a better whirl.
Right.
Uh,
Super above
it doesn't
curve.
do Yeah, so basically you have your spectrum of consistent to less consistent, but also least payout to most payout.
Right.
Uh, it as printed does no damage. So to get its after effect, you're gonna have to, seal an ultra, have any sort of power in play, or play it as an EX. But a lot of the time, the moment the opponent plays an EX, this card is not stunning. It's
Right.
very hard for it to get over uh, two defensive
Right.
stats.
And so
In
when
exchange, it just wins by positioning. You can just make the opponent miss,
right,
which is,
a 6 speed reposition is pretty strong, even if it's not doing damage.
yeah. And
Okay.
this one goes to your gauge.
Yes. Okay.
So you can turn any card engage to this engage, which is, a one force increase engage.
Right. Now, when I'm evaluating the cost of these ultras, you also mentioned that because these two seal themselves, they're sort of like stealthily a 2 gauge ultra. However,
Yep.
these ones seem like they have obvious use cases when you aren't sealing them. More gun down than steady ammo. I'm sorry, when you're playing them and not sealing another ultra on top of it. Should I should I consider this to be kind of a 2 gauge ultra that I don't, or a more
Are you
expensive,
saying
maybe not a,
you think focus on sealing? Like this one is best when you seal.
no, I don't mean that. I mean because I need to seal an ultra in order to do damage and stun with cheap shot. Is cheap shot slightly more expensive than it looks, even if the expenditure is not coming from gauge?
Slightly, yes, but I
Okay.
would also say you don't often really need to stun. If you can make null beats, null strikes on defense, the
I'm
opponent initiates into you,
right.
and you nullify it with cheap shot. That's better than, because if you're doing it on defense, you're not getting the advantage from sealing an ultra. You're spending two force essentially to make them spend two force. Yeah, spend two force
Right.
in one damage. It's not the biggest reward. Now, if they have two cards in hand, you know that's
That's
free real estate.
yeah, suddenly it's much more impactful. So maybe I'm not sealing for this, and I don't, maybe it sounds like you're saying sometimes I don't even care about the stun. I could also, like, there are uh the boost on love you, the boost there.
Yep.
Uh
Boost on grasp,
yeah,
which is
rock
let's rock.
let's rock. Yeah. So if I have other sources of power in the kit, I don't need to seal an ultra to get it. And as you said, this is best on defense, and I'm not getting the advantage in that case. All right, so that'll make sense. I'm just trying to get my head around
Yeah, no,
how his economy works.
yeah, and like if they if you do see a good opportunity to make them discard, take it. Like it's good, and you can initiate with cheap shot. Bait them out of options that deal with other things.
Right,
Like it's not a card that really should ever lose. It might not win, but it would rarely lose.
right,
And it refunds its cost. So you're not losing too much when you play it.
right. Because it's very very unlikely that it's gonna miss. Uh,
Yeah.
Short of specific speed dodges or something like that. Like a four range 6 speed is pretty easy to confirm.
Yeah.
Okay,
It varies from slightly below curve to very above curve.
right,
Um yeah, it's a very consistent annoying attack. These two attacks are just frustrating. You get hit by them and you will probably get tilted.
yep.
Uh,
Which sounds right
and
for
they
Happy
will.
Chaos.
Yeah. And then we have the only cancelable boost in his kit. Uh, he does not engage in the season mechanic very much.
Right.
So you have the. This is also the reason if I'm going first, I'm mulliganing for cheap shot.
Oh, because you
Uh,
engage.
yes. So you
Right.
return a card from your sealed area to your hand, and then add this to your gauge. So you don't have in Exceed, you don't have to perform the first part of an effect to do the second, so long as they're not dependent on each other. This
Okay.
is not. So you return a card from your sealed area. Even if you fail to do that, you still do the second part.
Right.
In this case, add this card to gauge, which is your first gauge as Happy Chaos. And Happy Chaos, that turns on 8 other cards because you spent one cheap shot to do it.
Right. So like this is an ultra that has key charge on it, unless
Yes.
you're using it for other stuff on top of it.
Yeah.
Um.
It it also, yeah, that's another thing. Like you seal steady aim, and then at some point two of them go down and one's in sealed. Some point the opponent gets lax and you get out to long range. Super focus lets you put that back into your hand,
Right.
and also gets you a gauge. And if you have one more gauge, then
You
cancel
cancel. Yeah.
free steady aim.
Right. Okay. So it's a way to confirm one of your strongest cards. Um. So on turn one, free gauge. Cool. Later in the game, um, you've got recursion from your sealed area, which is, I mean, normally you would need to exceed for that. And this is controlled recursion too. You pull a particular card rather than shuffling things back in. And it's cancelable, so you can set things up. So that's a strong boost.
Yes.
Okay.
And like if you run out, if you run out of gauge, it happens. They read your ultra and do something to do. They read gun down and they cross out of it, and you're
Yeah.
out of gauge. Or you just play gun down or steady aim and you only had the one gauge.
Right.
This
Because
restarts your engine.
right, because these don't go to gauge, so you might be going gauge negative occasionally. Okay.
And then super focus gets you that card back and gets you gauge.
Right.
It's just a really, like, you first look at it and it doesn't look all that impressive a boost. And then you think about the economy of it. It's it's just phenomenal economy.
Yeah.
You lose nothing by playing it, like in terms of resource value.
Right.
Because
At worst, it's going to your gauge. So you're not
yeah,
actually it's a two force worth of card that you're playing that puts two force in your gauge.
yep,
Uh, and also you might get a sealed card out of area into your hand. That first gauge could
which
be
is
very
another two
valuable.
force.
Right. So
Yep,
that's
and
it. Yeah.
yeah,
It
it's sneaky.
it can just generate force from nowhere. That first gauge is valuable. Okay, so that's an extremely powerful boost. It sounds like. Now, as we're talking about this, you mentioned that Happy Cast is kind of an opportunist, so it's probably difficult to triage these use cases. But just from the length of time that we spent talking about them, is this more often a boost than it is an attack?
Yeah, it's more consistently. Like some games you'll play two or three cheap shots, and some games you'll just play super focus. It it goes by situation by situation. I prefer super focus because I find it to be more impactful than cheap shot,
Right.
but it's not the worst.
Right. And
Like
it's not too tough to think of use cases for a 1 to 4 range 6 speed that pushes
yeah,
repulse 1. So it's not like you're struggling to find a way to use cheap shot, so you might as well use super focus. Like they're both good.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But all three of his ultras are good on both sides.
Yeah. So just
Um,
use them where they'll be useful. Um
yep.
and
Use them to set each other up.
right. And
You know,
other than steady aim, you're not like holding them for the perfect moment. And even with steady aim, you have ways to get it back in your hand if you need it.
yeah, and you have ways to set it up, like
Right.
curse into it, and
Yeah. Actually,
or the other one.
both these boosts kind of set up steady
Yep,
aim. Okay.
the other one I really like is using your ability, either on defense, do a cross out. The
Mhm.
empty cross. Uh, you know, 3 that puts you at range 6,
Yep.
steady aim, or range 2 cross using the ability. So
Gain
4
advantage.
power, gain advantage. You end up at range 5,
Right.
steady aim. Uh, yeah, it's not it. it's surprisingly easy to set up.
Right. And with the
And
with the amount of time
yep,
that we spend talking about uh steady aim and setting up steady aim, again, to reiterate, the reason why we're talking about it so much is because you really want to hit with this card.
yeah, like you
Right.
can absolutely win without hitting it. Like
Right.
just win by consistently out trading the opponent.
Right.
But 6 power makes it a lot easier.
Right. Yeah.
Six power,
It
ignoring armor, untraded.
yeah, and yeah, and that's kind of the important part, is that you're unlikely to, if you're playing this right, you're unlikely to be trading with it at all, which is,
Yeah,
it means that all those other trades that you were just barely sneaking by ahead with, well, now suddenly you're way ahead, or now suddenly you've made up a life deficit.
yeah.
Okay.
All right. So those are his ultras. They're all good. They're all ultras.
Yep.
They should be good. They're the core of his kit. You either play them or seal them, or use their boosts, or even spend them as force.
Right.
Like, he's a sneaky character in that because he's got 9 ultras. He has very good blocks.
Oh. Right. He's
His
surprisingly
block,
tanky because he can just spend a lot of force.
yeah, he has extra force to spend on blocks. He has extra force to spend on movement. Though Curse and Drift are both movement boosts, so you're not super worried about that.
Right. And his attack shapes, that you said that these are all kind of fireballs. He's got good normals, but there might be a time when you're in melee range and you got a handful of fireballs. So you're backing up
That
as
is
you're advancing.
that is his greatest weakness is a handful of ultras and no gauge, or you're at close range and you're at range 1 and all you've got is fire, gun down, and steady aim.
Right.
Speaking of fire, this is a secret ultra. It's a 2 to 5, 2/4. That's not very impressive. It's like actually kind of bad.
Mhm.
It has hit, spend up to 3 force. For each force spent, plus 1 power and draw a card. So it has a change cards effect tied to it. Even without the power, the change cards effect would be strong
Yeah.
because it lets you draw into the ultras.
Right. And odds are you're drawing more than three force by spending up to
Yep,
three force.
especially if you spend from gauge, 1 card to draw 2 cards, or
Right.
an ultra at any point. 1 card to draw 2 cards is
Right.
just a good trade there. Like you're guaranteed to match the force you spend just by how force works.
Right. And then odds are, on top of that, because this is a third of your deck, you're there's a pretty decent chance that at least one of the cards you draw is going to be an ultra, and that now you're force positive.
Yeah. And
Right.
then you consider that it adds power to the attack. So this is actually often at least 5 power. You have
Right.
3 copies of these. So
EX it.
the odds of you having an EX in your hand are higher, which goes for the ultras as well, but a
Yep.
lot of the time EXing them doesn't make much of a difference.
Right.
Um yeah, so the odds of this being actually a 2 to 5, 3, 5 before you spend, and you can do hit effects in any order.
Yep.
So even if you have no ultras in hand, you can spend your force and draw into an ultra. So suddenly this is a 7 power, 5 speed because you've
From the character ability.
yep.
Right.
So you EX this and you spend 3 force. So that's 3 and then that's 6 and then you seal for your character ability. That's 7.
Right.
And you have advantage. Uh it's a secret ultra.
Yeah. That. So I remember, the capital D discourse about Happy Chaos from a couple of days ago. Not to date this video, um, is that you really don't want to get hit by fire.
Yes, and
And
you
that.
probably don't want to miss with fire.
Right. Okay.
So
This is actually kind of like,
yeah,
so,
it's
so not only secret ultra,
analogous to steady aim.
right? Not only a secret ultra, but also part of your win condition is hitting with this.
Yeah, yep. Uh, it's an incredibly useful effect. Uh, on a character that gets more benefit from it than most.
Right.
Um, and it's a card that the things that beat it lose to cheap shot and gun down
Right.
typically.
Because they're above curve. Right.
Yep. So the things that are faster than fire probably tie with gun down, which if you're initiating, uh, yeah, which is
Yeah,
also why EXing fire is super good. Um, Puts it up above curve
right.
or on curve. You can play this at 3. I rarely play it at 5. There's also a really nasty combo you can do. So say we're at 2, then I boost curse. I retreat 2. I spend a force and strike. I hit with my fire, and then hit, add this to gauge.
And
Then I hit, spend it.
now you have force to spend
Yep.
on fire. Okay, so you're just looping
Double
resources,
dipping.
really unreactively looping resources, and you probably gain advantage afterward too.
Yep. Another good one for that is Let's Rock.
Okay.
+1
Yep.
power, hit, add this card to your gauge,
Right.
and it draws you an additional card when you play it.
Right.
So it's not as unreactably looping, but it is extra resources you can just spend.
Right. Kind of out of nowhere. So normally when we talk about like a Rekka effect like this, um, the sort of received wisdom is spend just past the breakpoint, right? So if I initiate with this and my
Yeah.
opponent for some reason wild swing a dive, let's say,
Yeah.
I don't need to spend anything um in
Yes.
order
To stun.
to stun it. Most of the time with a Rekka, that's when the conversation ends. We're like, cool, I stunned, I'm done, I'm good.
Yep.
With fire, am I probably spending the 3 force anyway to get the
You,
cards and to do more damage?
yeah, probably.
Okay,
You may not spend the maximum amount because you don't want to spend an ultra from hand or whatever.
okay,
Because you might not get an ultra, and it's better to seal that ultra, like get that in seal,
right,
than to risk it. But you're probably because you seal an ultra and gain advantage. Advantage is worth at least 2 cards because you can at worst prep. So it's slightly better to steal the ultra. So rather than spend it. But, you know, it the power benefit is often less valuable than the draw.
right,
So most of the time you're spending the full 3 just because it's super valuable.
right. It's cycling your resources, and I mean, I'm controlling the card draw, or rather, I'm controlling the card discard. I'm spending the force. I'm saying, I don't need this card, or this card. What's in my deck is
Yep.
probably not only is it numerically better because it's probably worth more force, but it's cards I might actually need too.
Yep.
Okay,
The big one for me is gauge. Um, you know, this the thing I mentioned before about the steady aim, cross out to steady aim, cross out to fire works just as well. And that's a card from gauge you can spend. You only need 1 card in gauge, and if you're hitting with fire, fire is going to gauge.
right.
Unless you're low on ultras, you got a few sealed, 3, 4, 5 sealed, and you got a bunch in your discard. Then at that point, you should probably be looking to exceed
To
at
exceed,
some
right.
point.
Right. And that is
But
kind of like the time that you're hoping to exceed is just when it's not when you're trying to hit with Deus Ex Machina. It's when you have enough
yeah, when
cards in your sealed area to justify it.
justify it. Yeah. So typically, I look to something like when the cards in the sealed area outweigh the remainder in my deck.
Sure.
So something like that is a good rule of thumb. But mostly, it's just a play by feel.
Yeah.
Um,
And you can't seal anything but ultras, right? There's nothing
Correct.
on either of these cards or is normals that seal. So basically if you have 5-ish in
Yeah,
in your sealed area, you should start thinking about exceeding in the next handful of turns.
often even less than that. So 3 or 4, I find, is about that. 3 to 5 is where I will exceed. 3 because some have gone to discard whatever. Like I've spent gun down and I've boosted gun down for curse, and I've landed cheap shot and spent that as force.
Oh,
So they've gone to discard.
there's other places besides your sealed area where your ultras can land. So you're saying it's specifically the relationship between sealed area and sorry, I was thinking of it
Deck.
as yeah, sealed area and deck, but there's other places they could go to.
Yeah, you were thinking about sealed area versus total.
Yes, I was.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is also not a bad rule of thumb, but that might just be a bit late.
Right.
Because not only does Deus Ex Machina get them back, it is also a draw 3
Sure.
and a consistent damage.
Yeah, so it's both kinds
Like,
of reload. It also just occurred to me that you can use your character ability on Deus Ex Machina, can't you?
no, you cannot. Because the character ability is on the
Oh,
front side only.
it's on the front side.
Yep,
Okay, that makes sense. So when you are doing this, you don't have your character ability is that you're playing Deus Ex Machina.
correct.
Gotcha. Okay, I see.
Yeah. Uh, that is a common mistake people will make. No, you cannot. It's a bummer, but it makes sense.
But it also means that like it insofar as Deus Ex Machina, like Deus Ex Machina is a fairly high tempo exceed action because you're striking during it. Um,
Yep,
but it
and drawing.
yeah, it doesn't add anything to gauge or anything unless you decide to put your character card over into gauge.
Uh,
But
your character card cannot leave play. Do not add it to your gauge.
yeah,
It says it on the front side.
definitely don't do that. Um, but it sounds like Deus Ex Machina is almost like as close to Happy Chaos has as like a downturn.
Yeah,
So
you strike with Deus Ex Machina. Your opponent guaranteed gets the next turn.
right. Okay, that's good to
So
know.
when you strike with Deus Ex Machina, you need to know what you're going to do next. Like,
Oh,
if the opponent strikes into you, how are you going to respond?
right.
Now, a wild swing's not a bad idea. You've just put a bunch of ultras back in your deck. You've got, if you've got one gauge, you can option select your way through.
Right.
Uh, one of them probably wins.
Yeah, odds are
Probably one of these two.
some combination of these ultras is probably going to beat what your opponent's throwing. That might be expensive, but you do have the options in your deck now, and you can filter through them, or just
Yep.
have a focus, have a sweep, whatever it is your
Yeah.
standard exceed rules of like have a card in your hand that you know that you can respond with.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's fire. It's a resource and damage monster. Uh that's just that you have 3 copies of them. So you play 2 as an EX, you badass the other copy.
Yep.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
Then it
that's
has scapegoat on it, which is a very good boost in situations when fire is not good.
okay.
So say we're at range 1. I can't hit with fire. And I don't have curse or drift.
Right.
It happens. I boost scapegoat. That's 2 armor. So my attack now has a 2 better delta. And now I can spend up to 3 life for each life spent, draw 2. So if I spend 2 life there, that is essentially net 0.
Right.
Unless the opponent plays an ignore armor card, it's roughly the same value, and I've drawn 2 cards.
Yes.
3, because 1 for end of turn.
Yep.
So it's very good. So on top of, you know, you now have a focus that is 4 armor, and you can seal an ultra for an extra power. Uh, which is just
Yeah,
hilarious
which is that
and
is
kind of excessive.
yeah, that is a lot of delta to put on one card with one boost and a character ability. So
Yeah.
it's one thing that I need to remember about this is kind of the math of the opportunity cost where oh I really don't
Yeah.
want to play scapegoat because fire is such an important card, but I have 3 of them.
Yes.
And I think that like I'm EXing 1, so really I ideally have 2, but but having 3 copies of a card actually changes the way that I evaluate these a lot. And I think this is the first time
Yes.
that we've talked about other than I guess Dan had a non-standard deck shape, but not like this. Like this might be the first time I've we've talked about a character that has more than 2 copies of a card. So
Yeah,
it changes things a
I
lot.
think I think he's the only one outside of season 6. Uh,
Yeah, that might be true.
he's a very funny man. Um, so yeah, he's got these. He does have 3 copies of it, but you're maybe not happy to play a scapegoat, but you're never unhappy.
Right.
It's 2 armor and it's resources, and because you're happy chaos, you have a lot of value you can draw into
Right.
because a third of your deck is ultras.
Right. So again, odds are you're even discounting card quality. Odds are you're up numerically on the force expenditure. Well, you're definitely up numerically on the force expenditure because you're spending life.
Life, yeah,
But even on the
yeah.
return on investment, you're probably getting more than you paid for. And then you factor in card
Remember,
quality, and it gets pretty
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. Remember, you are drawing one for end of turn as well when you
Yes.
spend life.
Yep.
So you are going to probably, if you're at 4 cards, you don't want to spend 3 life. You spend 2 and draw one for end of
And
turn.
draw one for end of turn. Sure. And I mean, so like this is ultra. Excuse me. So um, fire the attack is
Yes.
filtering for options, is drawing deep into your deck to look for something, and spending force to do it. This does the same thing, but it's also a hand reload because fire
Yes.
involves you spending force. I guess you're probably spending gauge first and foremost with fire, so you are getting a hand reload either way. But if you're trying to
Yeah.
actually increase the number of cards in your hand without spending force, scapegoat is how you do it.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
incredible. It's a silly good boost.
yeah,
Any EX with scapegoat that's 3 armor.
3 armor, sure.
Yeah. You probably land one. You land one EX fire. You hit for 7, and you play one scapegoat, and you probably win that strike too.
Yep,
Uh, that's a lot of power, but it is 3 cards. You've spent 3 cards there to do it, but that's still a lot of effect from a single card, from a
definitely.
single one of your options.
Right.
So those are the 4 really impressive cards. Note that they are all fireballs.
Yes.
Like he is not playing at range 1 with the cards in his kit, unless you look at the last one he has available to him at the ready. So 1 to 2, 2/6. Hit, you may draw 2 or return a card from your sealed area to your hand. Note, you can do hit effects in either order. So you can hit, return a card from your sealed area to your hand, and then seal it again
And
to
have
do the
advantage.
seal.
Yep.
Yep, yep. Or you could steal a card from your hand, then return it. Or you could draw 2 and then seal a card from your hand because you
Because
drew.
you drew an ultra, sure.
Yeah. So most of the time, in my opinion, you want to be doing the at the ready hit effect first. I think it gives away the least information and gains you the most information.
Right.
I also used to really favor um the secondary part, the return for the consistency. But as I've played more, I've found that the draw 2 is often just as consistent and it's better. You're drawing another card.
Right.
But if you need to stun an opponent, they played an EX assault at range 2 on defense. Because they did. Let's not think about it.
Right.
Um getting that extra 1 power matters a lot. Go for the consistent play. You
Yes.
get the next turn, you can draw 2 if you want anyway.
Right. You can prep. Um
Yeah.
and yeah, so I mean, just by dint of having so many ultras in his deck, the draw two is not as inconsistent as it looks. But there might be some situations, in the late game when it might be coming time to exceed, for example, when you don't have that many ultras left in your deck, and maybe then you pull
Yep.
something from your sealed area because drawing 2 is less likely to draw you an ultra.
Or the other thing is you return an ultra from your sealed area and seal a different one that you already had in your hand
Sure.
because you want the other ultra. You
Right.
know, they're good cards. Um, but most of the time, I enjoy the seal to the draw two.
Okay.
Um, this is another 1 to 2 2/6 card. So this serves what I consider the funny happy chaos mix up, which is cross at the ready spike. You stand at range 2 and you make your opponent guess. Things that answer cross probably don't answer, definitely don't answer spike, and almost certainly, and the odds of them answering at the ready aren't phenomenal. At the ready is the best option to continue your offense because you draw 2, you gain advantage. You're
Right.
still at range 2, you can still do your thing.
Right.
And spike is spike. It
Right.
wins.
Uh, unless you're, I mean, when you say you can still do your thing, a lot of your thing is at range though. So
Yes,
so like the fight between that and cross to because you already talked about cross being a good way to set up steady aim or
and
fire or something
fire.
like that. Yeah. So if you have other things that you can hit with at range 2, uh, or that you're about to draw into them, I guess with at the ready, that's the play. Otherwise, you might consider crossing out in order um to set up the rest of your
Set up.
offense. And
The other thing is,
Spike is there because you love
yes,
Spike.
yeah. It also like spike with an extra power and gain advantage. 6 damage that doesn't trade
Right.
and gets you advantage.
Right. Is
And
pretty
at the ready and spike, I think, have the same purpose. Is if they're at range 2, you are still threatening that mix up.
right. You don't want to
You're
leave
still
range
threatening.
2 for that reason.
Yeah. Like if I at the ready and gain advantage, I can still play cross the next turn.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I guess I should have said Spike is in that mix up because you like Spike for good reason. Um,
Yeah.
it
Uh,
not
it
because you're biased, but because it's a good card.
Yeah, it also lands a lot. I
Right.
find as happy chaos. People often will block at range 2. I don't know why,
Mhm.
but it. I just find that to be successful. I think it's because against the rest of his kit, the best card in his kit to block is fire, because you get a better conversion rate, and even still, it's not good because he's getting other benefits aside from the raw power.
Right.
Um, yeah, it's it just lands well. Yeah, but at the ready, it's not a particularly impressive card, but it is an option at close range, which the rest of his kit lacks, and it is more economy. He has his 2 specials are very economy focused,
Yeah. It seems like it.
and then his 3 ultras are 3 ultras, so that's extra force if you need it. So he is secretly an economy character. He will drown you in options and draw out your options, and then you get hit with
With steady
fire and
aim and
steady aim.
fire, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Then,
that's kind of the overall game plan. It sounds like is use your economy, use your many movement boosts, chip away at them with little hits here and there that they can't deal with. They're gonna run out
yep,
before
and
you.
advantage chain.
Yeah,
Like, you can keep striking into them with consistency. They cannot. They will run out of options before you do.
that makes sense.
Then you have Love You, which is an interesting boost. So it's +1 power. Now you may spend 1 force. If you do, discard another boost from play. Into other Season 7 characters, this isn't great. A lot of them aren't leaving a boost in play.
Because
They're
they're
canceling and
canceling into killing you.
yeah. But into other seasons, I'm up against Ryu. I'm out of dives. He goes, Way of the Warrior. And I go, Love You. I
Right,
spend a force. It's slightly more expensive, but I get 1 force out, 1 power out of it, and also he loses a Way of the Warrior.
right. Which is a more impactful boost. It might actually be something that you can't contest otherwise. So it's tech.
Yeah,
It's tech with
yeah,
power on it, and but in this season you don't have tech. You have Ukemi.
Ukemi.
Right.
which is
Okay.
tech that you can cancel it.
Right. So it's a kind of different way to a different way
Yeah,
to diffuse a bad situation while also getting
which
power
is
out of it.
something season 7 characters can have trouble against. If, in boost wars, if they don't have the resources to chain cancelable boosts, which Happy Chaos can't really do anyway, because he only has the one from his kit.
Yeah.
Uh,
He,
it's another way to diffuse stuff.
right. It's like Happy Chaos doesn't have action compression the way the rest of season 7 does. He just has from his character ability, he just has like more action.
Yeah, he gets turn compression.
Yeah, it's action compression versus action surplus.
Yeah, he has the actions.
Right.
Shut up. It's his turn now.
Right. You just keep going.
Uh, yeah. So I think this is something that makes him quite useful into characters from other seasons because there aren't many characters that have access to Vortex in their kit,
Right.
and Happy Chaos doesn't really care about playing dive because he's got tools that at that range.
Yep.
Um, and then at the ready's not a card that you desperately want to play. Like you'll play it, you won't complain about playing it.
Right.
But like if Love You's better in a matchup, Love You's better in a matchup.
Right. And it like is at the ready the kind of card that you would be pretty happy to spend on fire as force.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. At the ready, dive, block,
Okay.
assault even. Um,
St-
because when you use
st-
your ability, you don't get as much from it.
oh, sure, you're not getting double advantage. And stuff that depositions you from your favorite range is probably, unless you're trying to hit specifically with normals, is probably not your preferred plan.
Yeah. And if you're at range 3, you've got other stuff that already hits.
Yep.
So like,
That already hits
you know,
and probably gains advantage.
yeah. So
Okay.
like don't assault like it's not bad and it has advanced 3 on a boost on it,
Right.
which can help if you're cornered.
Right. It can get
Uh
you out of the corner.
or, though you also have drift that does that and gets you another action.
Right.
So,
Right. But I mean, you might be playing, you might be playing steady aim for another in a couple turns anyway. So yeah, it's a. I mean,
yeah,
opportunistic again.
it's a consideration. Yeah,
Right.
he he's opportunistic. He's a slimy, sneaky little bastard.
Yeah.
Um, when you're playing Happy Chaos, what you need to think of is what would be the most annoying thing for me to do here, and you do it, and then your opponents will be annoyed.
Yeah, and that's its own moral victory.
Well,
It
it
might
also
also be
helps you win. Yeah,
it'll be the actual victory too, but it's also a moral victory.
yeah. Um, so one thing to note, just going through on each of these cards, at the ready, good close range tool, provides some mix up and means you don't just run out of options at close range.
Right.
It can also just sustain momentum. Assault in, at the ready, grasp, sweep.
Right.
You know, like that's a frustrating chain of things to deal with.
Yeah.
Um, fire any way you can cheat some force makes this exponentially better because cards engage. You can't spend like can't use like cards in hand. Um, cheap shot. Be aware of what your opponent's maximum and minimum ranges are. If the opponent is Ryu at range 4, and I think he's playing Hadoken, cheap shot is a lot less good. Like I initiate if I think the opponent has Hadoken, I probably don't want to initiate cheap shot, even though I'd outspeed it. If I can't seal to do damage and stun, the push or pull won't matter.
Right.
So he'll still be in range. So be aware of what the relevant threats the opponent has and what their ranges actually are. Because there's no point in, playing this card if you're not gonna, at least make them miss.
Right.
Um, Gundown is often better to threaten than to play.
Just because
Um,
it is so consistent, it just kind of
yeah,
wins most of the time.
yeah. The opponent will have to play around it existing. If they have one card in hand, though, like or 2 cards in hand, gun down. The more you rob them of their ability to respond, the better your less consistent cards are. Then,
Right.
if the opponent only has 1 card in hand, you don't need to play EX Fire most of the time.
Right.
Um, and then steady aim is when you land this, point and laugh.
Right.
You will probably land it. Like it's actually not super hard to set up and land. Um, just remember that you're gonna have this isn't gonna go to gauge, so you're gonna be out of gauge, and unless you seal, the opponent has the next turn. So you've got to be able to respond to it. Happy
Right.
Chaos is a momentum character. He wants to keep pushing the pace because he can draw all these cards and he can gain advantage every turn. But when he's not on that offense, you need to know what you're going to do so you don't die.
Right. That makes sense. So I have a couple of questions about some of the things that you just mentioned. One
I
is
have a couple of answers.
perfect. You're in the we're in the right place then. One is the thing that you mentioned about at the ready was like at the ready, assault, grasp, uh, sweep, or something like
Yeah,
that. Like that
I think assault at the ready, grasp,
grasp
sweep. Yeah.
sweep. There you go. Yeah. So when you're doing stuff like that, you you just sealed three ultras to land that combo because
Uh,
one of them had
Probably 4 because I'll seal one off the sweep as well.
off the sweep as well, sure, and then reload or something. But
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
notably, the cards that you just listed that you were playing were not ultras. Um,
Yes.
so there are some situations obviously where you have a bunch of ultras in your hand and they're not the most impactful thing. Cool, seal them and do your um
Normals man
normals man
boosts. Yeah.
with at the ready, like all the ways that you would normally uh make use of advantage chains and stuff like that. So question one, how often are you advantage chaining while also spending other ultras? Is that just prohibitively expensive, or
So
is it
like
just
I'm
better to
playing
do
an
it
ultra
otherwise?
and then playing an ultra and advantage chaining,
Yes.
like off that ultra.
Right.
Um, so I find it's not super uncommon off steady aim. Um, just because if you have another ultra, it's probably not going to be immediately useful anyway off
Right.
steady aim.
And if
Like you're at
you
range 8.
and that extra +1 power might actually be pretty useful to stun something. Well, at the range you're
Yeah,
playing it at, maybe not, but
but it's also ignore armor, so it's also guaranteed to be an
guaranteed
extra power.
guaranteed damage, right?
Yeah. Now, if your opponent plays assault or whatever, so it moves them in a bit, then you might think about not playing it. They haven't dodged the attack, but they're no longer at range 6, they're at range 4.
Right.
Then you
Now,
go, okay, maybe I won't seal the gun down so I can defend with it.
right.
Um, but, and cheap shot, you will if it stuns, if that is useful. Like if you've initiated with cheap shot and they have, you know, 2 cards in hand. Okay. Or you've initiated with cheap shot and you have a good follow up to it. I think the only one you don't really do it with is gun down.
Okay.
Uh,
That makes sense.
just because it doesn't give gun down any benefit. Like
Right.
the advantage is nice, but it's not that big of a deal. Whereas steady aim, gaining advantage and an extra unblockable damage is pretty good. And cheap shot is cheap shot.
Right.
Uh,
Becomes much, much better when it has some power on it because of its discard effect.
yeah. And it is because it's on a hit effect. You're not committed to anything. You can look at the board state
Right.
once their attack is revealed and go, do I think this would gain me more value?
Right. That makes sense. So when you have a mixed hand of a couple of normals, a special, and a couple of ultras or something like that, this is
Yeah,
obvious.
yeah.
This is probably a very complicated question heuristically to answer. But like, how are you evaluating whether
What sort of line I want to play?
yeah, because you, like, as mentioned, opportunistic character, right? You're taking the things that come up. Sometimes you have a ton of opportunities, and
Yes.
he has a lot of strong things to do. How do you decide?
So the first thing you consider is, do you have gauge?
Mhm.
Or do you have an easy way to gain gauge? Like, if I have one gauge or I have an easy way to gain a gauge while I have zero gauge, those immediately impact what I can do. Because that means the ultras are actually alive.
Right,
You know, that matters a lot. Then I consider what range we're at, and therefore then I consider what my opponent can do before I even really consider my own hand. Because of what he's got, he's fairly consistent, right? Like
right,
if I've got a few ultras and a special and a couple normals, if I'm at range 3 or 4, I'm probably golden.
right,
Like so then from there you look at what the opponent can do, and then you look at your hand and go, all right, I have these options. I should probably be in this positioning, you know, you basically work to be in the position where the most threats are live, the most threats as valued by impact are
right,
live. So, like
right,
if I'm at range 3, fire is still live. It's below curve, but it beats. If you initiate with fire, it still beats spike and dive, which are not uncommon on defense at range 3,
right.
and can beat sweep if
If you
the
e- if you
stars align.
if you exit or something, and you drop a ultra on it,
An ultra,
right,
and that's worth it. That beating a sweep like that, it's absolutely worth it. But
right,
yeah, so like you think about what the threats you've got in your hand are and what the threats you have remaining are, and where would you be best served to present those threats. Sometimes you look at your hand and go, all right, so I have at the ready and I have 2 copies of steady aim in hand. And then you look at, and then you go, oh, I have grasp and sweep as my, so a 5 card hand, where at range 4, I have 2 steady aims, and at the ready, a grasp and a sweep. In that situation, I might just go boost drift, advances to me to range 1. That's a pretty good situation. I have a grasp, a sweep, and an at the ready.
yep,
I have an ultra to seal, and I'm drawing a card. Like it, it's worth considering what the threats you have in your hand actually do.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is hard. You will probably end up playing a mix of ultras and like hitting
right.
using normals, because the ceiling of ultra, you need to generate gauge to play the ultras, which you basically have to land the normals to do, because
Because
you
most
know
of these don't go to gauge.
those don't go to gauge. You're probably spending gauge off fire, but you
Right,
still probably have one. Like it, so you need to probably be playing normals to make them work,
right,
and you need to have uh. And when you're playing normals, you're probably sealing ultras to gain advantage.
right.
So it's sort of like a give and take, equilibrium sort of thing.
You're always spending something, and depending on the situation, you're spending a different thing and gaining a different thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like ideally, like in all Exceed, you want to get the maximum value you can without trading. That is the fundamental way to win the game for most characters.
Right.
Uh, that's
So
why cross frustrates me.
that's a difficult evaluation to make about how to play your hand when it's mixed, but it's also like that's a pretty good problem to have. Like like having so many options and being able to change them or being able to use them as you want to is good.
Yeah.
Especially
There's
con-
plenty of room for optimization and flexing, like flexing between lines.
right,
Like you go to do one thing and the opponent does something, then you pivot to another line.
right,
You don't get married to playing any one sort certain way. Be prepared to shift as needed.
right. Yeah, based on the situation, based on your hand, your deck, your opponent's hand, your opponent's deck, the board state, gauge, all those
Yeah,
things.
you're not a character that has a super committed win con.
Right,
Like fire and steady aim, Yeah, they're good cards that hit hard. So is Sweep with +1 power.
Yep.
Um, yeah, so is Cross hitting for 4 and not getting hit, and then, you know, the opponent tries to strike you and you cheap shot them and keep them out.
Yeah.
Like, you have a lot of ways you can win the game.
Right. And so the situation that I just asked about was about when you have lots of different options in your hand. And you mentioned earlier that one of his weaknesses is that it's very possible to have, you know, all ultras or all fireballs in your hand and not be able to play them. That seems like it might be a good time to talk about how to counterplay him. Like what are his weaknesses? What can his opponent do to exploit them? And how does Happy Chaos deal with that?
Okay, so the first thing is deny him gauge where possible.
Yep.
Um, Specifically the first one. Anything more than that is sort of like whatever. He's got what he needs once he's got that first gauge.
Right.
But if you can deny him generating a gauge, that's a third of his deck that he cannot play as attacks, and they are good attacks. Uh, Also, you if you get up close, he's forced to play with the normals. You know, this range one, he has only at the ready and normals.
Right. It's just that those are quite threatening because of his character ability. Because if he can't play his ultras, he might as well seal them.
Yep. On top of that, you want to initiate into him. If you're initiating into him, the value of those ultras is lessened. You're still taking an extra damage, but he's not gaining advantage. He's not taking multiple turns in a row off of it.
Right.
Your sweep is still hitting his sweep, even if he hits you back slightly harder.
Okay.
Now, the thing is, when you do close in on him like that, he's probably going to do something like drift, or if you're at range one at not in the corner, he's probably going to play curse
Right.
to get out. So he's either going to move past you or retreat out. That means those attacks aren't live. If he drifts past you, that's one less steady aim in his hand. If he if he curses, that's one less gun down he has in his hand, and an extra force he's spending. So you want to pay attention to the ultras he has in sealed and the ultras he has in discard, because that's free information, and that's information he's going to bleed willingly because it's good
Right.
for him. But it's also a lot more information on what the big threats are left in his deck.
Right. Is he bleeding a
Um,
lot? It seems like he's bleeding quite a bit of information because
I,
he's discarding ultras, he's playing cards. This uses force. Like a lot of the things he's using, he's going through them pretty quickly.
yes, yeah. He's gonna run through his deck.
Okay.
Like I play quickly. I'm a player that goes through ends games often before reshuffle,
Right.
often with like 10 or more cards left in deck. And then I find even with Happy Chaos, if I even after exceeding, I will have like 3 cards left in deck,
Right.
sort of thing. Or like just post reshuffle. Like he
Right.
plays burns through cards very quickly.
Okay. And so as his opponent, you can take advantage of patterns that emerge from that and start to find places to stand or cards to threaten with that, the value of your hand changes. As Happy Chaos, I need to be aware of that and control my option
Yeah.
feed to deny my opponent the ability to do that.
Yeah, sometimes you might not seal for advantage because it would mean sealing the last copy of Gundown, for
Right.
example.
Right, sure. And now suddenly they don't have to worry about my above curve ignore guard.
Yeah, it means you can just play like an EX,
Right.
and suddenly then Cheap Shot can't move you out of range. Can't stun you. It might so like range 2 EX, and it's like, oh, okay, I don't lose here, sort of thing.
Right, right.
So it's a every character you should be paying attention to what cards are going down. Happy Chaos doubly so.
Right.
Because they are such strong individual tools that do different things for his kit.
Right.
He doesn't really have redundancy in his kit.
Right. And well, except that he has 3 copies of the of some of most of the cards. So he
Yes.
like, he doesn't have uh assault and an assault like, for example, but he does
Yeah.
have at least like slightly more redundancy than most characters on an individual card.
Yeah.
But your
Yeah.
point's well
He
taken on
doesn't
the
have
redundancy.
redundant. Yeah, he doesn't have redundancy across cards. He has redundancy by by volume.
Yeah, in an individual card. That makes sense. What about his his need to exceed to reload? Is that a weakness that that his opponent can play around, or is that something that is just kind of the cost of doing business as Happy Chaos?
So where with his need to exceed to reload, um, if he's feeling pressured, he might exceed with only the 3 gauge. Uh, Punish him for that. That's you know that means there's stuff he can't play. That's a situation where he's on 0 gauge.
Yeah,
Anytime he's on 0 gauge, kill him, make him suffer.
right. Get as
Uh,
much out of it as you can.
if you can beat Deus Ex Machina, do it. Um,
Like without getting
it's
hit, you
very
mean?
rare.
It not
Yeah, like if you can stun it, go ahead.
right,
Or empty cross out. Like we're here, and he plays Deus Ex Machina, and I cross out.
right.
That's a win.
Oh yeah, he can't get his ultras back now.
Yep, and he doesn't get the draw 3.
Yep, and he just
Uh,
spent 3 gauge to do it.
yep.
Okay,
The
and
other thing is,
and this is
yep,
always pretty much face up for Happy Chaos, like because as you
it,
said,
it is
yeah, you
blank face up.
yeah
Like it's coming.
you exceed and do the attack. So my opponent is going to be holding options in order to
Yeah,
deny me all those resources.
yeah. Like
Okay,
you can see exactly what he's played.
right,
It's uh if that's not the case, you don't have something to beat it. A lot of characters don't. Just trade with it.
yeah,
Um, don't get fancy with it. It's probably not even worth blocking. If you can play, you know, a grasp into it even, and then
yeah,
you have positional control
yeah.
or whatever.
The value isn't necessarily the 4 damage that he's dealing. It's the hit effect though. So if you can somehow make it miss, despite it being such a
Yeah,
consistent attack, that's your real win condition against that card.
yeah,
Okay,
yep.
that makes
Um,
that makes sense.
it's important to remember because it's so consistent. If you get close to the end of the game, he might just flip to attack you with it.
To just kill you, yeah,
Yeah, you're on 2 life, and he's on you know 5.
right,
You're not stunning. You're not doing enough damage to kill him before
right,
this kills you.
right, and like good luck dodging it, and all of the other we already talked about. Like it's a super consistent card. So
Yeah.
when he's the vibe I got, sorry to deviate from counterplay for a second.
No, all good.
The vibe I got from you talking about this is that he wants to be hovering around 1 or 2 gauge to be uh using his ultras and having some force in the bank for fire. But at some point over the course of the game, he does need to build up some, at least to 3 and preferably
Yes.
to 4 in order to um to get
Yeah.
the
To flip.
yeah, to get the gauge to flip. Most characters don't like in order to gain gauge, they frequently have to be aggressive. With Happy Chaos, do I need to kind of take my foot off the gas a little bit to, or at
No.
least play normals instead of playing
Yeah.
ultras for a while?
You're gonna have to probably stick to the normus for a little bit, but you're
Okay,
gonna be still just as aggressive because you're sealing the ultras, which
right.
puts them in your sealed area to flip back.
To flip
But
back
it
into
also
right.
means you can, without the opponent getting a turn, go from 0 to 3 gauge very easily.
Very true. And then and then you exceed, and then all those things that you spent to get those advantage chains comes back. Okay,
Yeah,
it's not that you need to take your foot off the gas; it's that you need to use different options than you would to with the
yeah,
ultras playing them. Okay,
yeah. I, you need to be aware of like what you're spending and when. Uh, like for your force, he's a very resource management character because you've got different areas to spend it to and from. He's also a very threat management based character.
Right.
Like you are down uh, two copies of Cheap Shot. Like one is sealed and one is in discard or whatever. But you still stand at if you still stand at range 3, you're still threatening a Cheap Shot.
Right.
So it's important to you should be very cognizant of the threats you have available to you as Happy Chaos. Just because they're good, they are hard to answer. It's near impossible to answer all of them.
Right.
Is what I should say.
Right. So you can kind of always mix up your opponent, but also in order to mix up your opponent well, you need to know how to mix them up.
Yeah, you need to make sure you have the things remaining to mix them up
Right.
and be in the places where those mix-ups exist.
Right. And are the best that they can be. That makes sense. So what it sounds like is short of, some vulnerabilities here and there, counterplay wise, like people watching this guide in the hopes of finding the magic bullet to beat Happy Chaos are going to be disappointed. But
Yeah,
he's not
just
unbeatable.
play better than him.
Yeah, you just have to play
Just
better Exceed than him. Um
yeah,
are
you
there
have better boosts.
are there
Like
any
that is a fundamental flaw with his kit.
right,
He has +1 power and +2 armor, and that's the stats he has available to him.
right. He doesn't have
Um,
much in the way of stat boosts. I mean, his boosts are good, but they're mostly utility boosts.
yeah.
Yeah,
So he's not going to want to boost war with you. He has the extra copies of tech, but that's 4 copies of tech, whereas you probably have more than 4 good boosts in your kit.
right.
Hmm.
That makes sense.
Uh, yeah, I cut you off there. Yeah, what were you trying to say?
Oh, so like it you play better Exceed than him. Um it's just that his the shape of his Exceed game is a little bit different. Is he kind of like a knowledge checky character? Can he
Yeah,
like like
you
like
should
if you don't know what he's
if
doing,
you
does he just run you over?
yeah, if you do not know how to play against him or how he's going to play, you are going he's going to get take 4 turns in a row against you, and then he's going to hit you with a big ultra, and you're just going to be sitting there like, what the hell has happened?
Right. Right. And maybe it's partially because season 7 is still, fairly new, but the impression that I got is that a lot of people do not know what to do against Happy Chaos because they don't know what he's doing.
I'm happy to demonstrate for them, but people don't want to play more than one game.
Yeah, I can't imagine why.
Yeah. Happy Chaos Gaming, etc., etc.
Of course. All
Yeah.
right. So, any other kind of miscellaneous tips you want to give about how to play Happy Chaos?
Um, have fun. Uh, like his
Have
his
have enough
kit.
have enough fun for both you and your opponent because you're the only one who will be having fun.
Yeah, like play your mix ups. Stand at range 2 to 4. You probably have some success.
Yep.
Um, don't be too concerned if you are having trouble to begin with. If you are a new player and you pick him up, he's resource management heavy. It's a bit different in Exceed than in other games, so you might be struggling there.
Right.
Don't sweat it.
Right. Exceed is a hard game to play, and he's a complicated character.
Yeah. He's deceptively complex. He's both simple and complicated. Like in just simple playing him, pretty simple. He's got simple effects. His cards aren't complex. He's complicated in the longer term meta strategy type level.
The resource management, the economy, the threat management, as you said.
Yeah. Um, if you're playing into other zoners, basically do what your opponent doesn't like.
Hmm.
Because you can do it. You know, normals with +1 and advantage chain into a zoner. Great. Uh, someone who likes to play closer range, stay away from them and hit them with fireballs till they get upset.
Right. Right. So
Aside from that,
it
I
it,
think that's all I got.
it's actually kind of analogous to how I hear people talk about Ryu sometimes, like stand where your opponent doesn't want you to stand.
Yeah, I don't hate that for Happy Chaos either. Like
Yeah,
for yeah, I think Ryu has probably better individual tools, but Happy Chaos can maintain that state for longer
right. That
because
makes
he's just
sense.
advantage chaining.
Right. That makes
Like
sense. So like Happy Chaos might have a more defined game plan that he wants to run, but he can also just default back to what does my opponent hate, and I'll do that.
yeah,
Okay.
like I want to throw fireballs, but if I'm not throwing fireballs, I can absolutely work with whatever is frustrating.
Right. Right. And the sort of heuristic you should be running is if my opponent hates this, it's probably also the right play.
Probably, yeah.
Makes sense. Cool. All right. Do you we sometimes talk about other characters
Similar
who yeah,
characters.
who play like
Uh
Happy Chaos if we've got some time. So, if you've got any lined up, I'd love to hear them.
so you got your resource management characters. So characters like Ram, characters like Remy in season two. I think even someone a bit like Rachel in season five. But you've also got a character who lines up on that and also sort of the zona access fight. A character I've also spoken to you about.
Right.
He's a character that also has three ultras. He also spends resources for extra power. He is happy to do the range thing or the close thing. Um, he does an advantage chain like Happy Chaos does, but he hits a lot harder.
Right. In
Um,
one strike, he might be doing what Happy Chaos does in two.
yeah. So I think if you like Happy Chaos, might be worth looking into Fight.
Yep.
Um, and if you like the like pure resource management fiddliness stuff, you got Rachel, you got uh Ram, and the who else? Remy a lot. She's very resource management heavy.
Right.
Um, and like he's a mid rangey zoner, so someone like Jin or like Kai even
Okay.
that can stand up close and can stand a bit further away.
Right. And yeah, so that kind of counterpuncher, counterplay character, um, that might be sort of like his like sub theme, like a slightly less obvious than his resource management stuff, but maybe something to consider there too.
Yeah, like Ryu as well
Yep.
can. But yeah, um, realistically, he is also an advantage chain character.
Mm.
So if you like advantage chaining, there's quite a few characters that do that now.
Yep.
Hazama, who has the resource stuff. I don't think there's anyone in season four. Um, Zolt in season two. If you this is your villain origin story.
Well, I mean, if you're gonna have a villain origin story, Happy Chaos is probably a pretty good place to start.
Yeah, I guess I'm not the bad guy here. I'm in the right.
You keep telling yourself that, Reggie.
I'm gonna win. And victors write the histories.
That's true. No one will be around to besmirch you then.
Exactly.
Perfect. All right.
But
Yeah, please go
yeah,
ahead. Sorry.
no, I was just gonna say. But yeah, cool character. Uh, it's very entertaining to watch people get frustrated because they're playing wrong.
Yep.
So yeah,
And if they're playing right, then you have a good game and you get to have fun anyway.
yeah, like there's no lose state there.
Perfect. Yeah, so everybody watch this video so that Reggie can have more fun playing against people who know how to play Happy Chaos.
It's okay. I've taught them wrong as a joke.
As a joke. Yeah, that's the big secret. That everyone has done that with all of their characters. They don't want to give away their tech. Like this whole The whole enterprise of Exit Succeed has been
Yeah,
useless because everybody is lying to me.
I have not lied about Happy Chaos because I just don't think you guys can win. Like
Damn, Reggie, get him. I love it.
I played a tournament recently with Happy Chaos, and I did not lose any of the games I played with Happy Chaos. Ignore the rest of my results in that tournament. Did not lose any of my Happy Chaos games.
Happy Chaos had a much better record than you did, maybe.
No, because I think other people played poorly with him, sadly.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah. So now go out there and win your own games with Happy Chaos, improve his tournament numbers, spread the word
Yeah,
about this character. Hopefully you have some fun with him. Hopefully your opponents learn to have some fun with him. He sounds kind of cool, despite him being frustrating.
yeah. I think the frustrating thing is largely overblown, or
I think
people
it
playing it as a joke.
I think it might actually just be a knock on from Guilty Gear Strive too, where
Yeah,
he's really, really
yeah,
frustrating to fight in that game and he has a reputation and the reputation might be somewhat deserved in Exceed, but maybe not to the same extent.
yeah. That's definitely also possible.
Yeah.
If you like the character, don't feel guilty about playing them.
That's true.
That's
That like we are joking when we're talking about how much your opponent will hate you. Like Exceed is a fun game. You'll be fine.
yeah.
Certainly don't let us dissuade you from playing a character that you like. Right.
Hmm.
With all that said, I think we've got enough to wrap it up. So Reggie, as always, thank you so much for your time and for your expertise. Really, really appreciate. Always love talking to you.
All good. I told you I could ramble for 90 minutes.
You did it. Um, and I'm looking forward to having you on again uh, for some more characters.
Yeah, I think I've got a couple more left on my list.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to them. All right, everybody. Thank you
Hmm.
so much for watching. I will see you all for the next one, and have a good day.
Bye.